Um, Here's what I'll expect to cover. So the cost of college, financial aid, having the money talk, and then that'll be the first half of the presentation. So costs, what financial aid is, things like that. And then the second half will be about the FAFSA. Okay, so what is the cost of college? Well, there is the sticker price, so it's all of the costs that you could have. Financial aid is anything that reduces costs. And then estimating costs, what is it that you will actually pay after financial aid applies? There is a tool, it's called Net Price Calculator, and it's found here on the link on the slide. And it'll give you an estimate of your estimated financial aid offer to attend a specific college. And so you input your information. Again, it's an estimate, but it can give you a good idea of what you'll expect to get in financial aid. And then that can help you with comparing costs at different institutions. Here's a breakdown of charges that you can expect to have. We have two big categories, direct charges and indirect charges. And so direct are the ones that all students will have. All students will have tuition and required fees. And if you're living on campus, you'll also have housing and food. There are indirect charges. So these oftentimes can vary. So there's books, course materials. It depends on what classes a student's enrolled in. There's the technology needs, an iPad, a certain type of laptop. Personal expenses, this can really vary for each student, and then transportation costs. Cost of attendance, this is a term that you will hear a lot. Cost of attendance, or COA for short, it's an estimate of the cost that you could have in 1 year. And so a cost of attendance is made up of tuition, required fees, housing, meal plan, book supplies, transportation, personal expenses. It doesn't mean that you will be charged the full cost of attendance amount in your situation, but this cost of attendance is important because it is the amount of financial aid that is your maximum financial aid. So if your cost of attendance is $34,000, remember that it doesn't mean that it will cost you $34,000 to attend an institution, but just know that's your cost of attendance, and then that's your limit for financial aid. So this is a breakdown of the categories that make up a cost of attendance. And so these are for UMR, these are for our current year. So in the summertime, these might get updated because there's a group called the Board of Regents. They meet and they determine if tuition and required fees go up, if residential life, they will get together and also determine if housing costs will be changing or not. At any institution that you decide to attend to, it's always good to understand what you're going to be charged for. And so here, you have the tuition, required fees, and then other expenses. And this other expenses box, again, it can really vary based on the type of meal plan you're on, the type of housing accommodation, the types of classes you're enrolled in, if you're going to have a car versus having a bus pass, things like that. So it's always good to just get a good understanding of what you're paying for and why you're paying for those things. This is what an estimated financial aid offer could look like. So when students fill out a FAFSA, around springtime, but again, it can vary for each institution. So in our case, the estimated financial aid offers go out February, March. And so this gives you a good idea of the charges you'll expect to have, and then the financial aid you'll be getting. And then this gives you a good idea on what you'll expect to pay in terms of either out-of-pocket costs or maybe thinking about plans for getting a loan. And so here, the first part, you have the breakdown of expected charges. And then the second box, you have the financial aid. This can change if maybe a scholarship wasn't awarded yet. But for the most part, if the income and assets reported on a FAFSA form, if they're accurate, then your estimates should be pretty accurate. Work study, I will touch more on this on a second slide, but here it makes it seem like the work study will apply directly to a student's account. and it doesn't. So work study money goes directly to the student. If the student does have a remaining cost to pay after financial aid applies, then and if there's work study that was offered, then it's probably a good idea to use those funds to pay off what is still left over. But again, I'm going to touch on that more in a second. And then loans. Loans are optional, but loans are a way to decrease costs. And so I would encourage you to have a meeting with the financial aid office. You can get in touch with them also through email and just to get a good understanding of what everything entails on your estimated financial aid offer. This one is just an example of a student that's living with family. And so when a student lives with family, their cost of attendance is lower because their costs are lower. So they might not have any costs for housing. They might not have any costs for food, but we do factor in an amount for that. Okay, I'll pause here. Any questions so far? You can put it in the chat. You can open up the mic if you'd like.
I have a question.
Yes.
You said loans decrease costs. What did you mean by that? How would they decrease a cost versus just paying toward something?
I'm sorry if that was misleading. So you can, if a student still has a remaining amount to pay after scholarships and grants apply, so money that doesn't have to be paid back, if there's still, let's say $10,000, then a loan could help. And then if
Okay.
a student takes out a loan, then that would decrease their costs. That's what I had meant when I
Okay.
said that. So sorry if that was misleading or confusing.
That's okay. I just wanted to see if there was a direct correlation between like if you get a loan, then the cost of attendance is lower or something like that. But I understand now. Thank you.
Yep. Other questions? Let's see here. Chat. Okay, don't see anything. Okay, I will move on. Now let's dive into what entails financial aid. So financial aid is money that comes from other sources other than your family to help cover the cost of college. So there's three buckets for financial aid. There is gift aid, there is earned aid, and there is borrowed aid. The first type we'll talk about is gift aid. So this is the kind of financial aid that we all want because it's money that you don't have to pay back. So examples of gift aid can include scholarships. It can include, like in the state of Minnesota, the Pell Grant, the Minnesota State Grant, the North Star Promise. There are scholarships from the school, external scholarships, and sometimes there are even opportunities through an employer where they might cover certain costs. Or they might cover a certain amount of tuition. The North Star Promise, this is specific to the state of Minnesota. So this type of financial aid is gift aid. And so this will cover tuition and required fees after gift aid. So things like scholarships and grants apply. So if you're eligible, and if your scholarships and grants only cover a certain part of your tuition and required fees, and let's say there's $5,000 left in unpaid tuition and required fees, then the North Star Promise would cover that remaining amount. If there's more questions, there is the web page. It's very thorough. It does have like a frequently asked questions section. And so again, this is factoring in income from tax year 2024. Work study. So I had mentioned I would talk about work study. So work study is money from the government that helps to fund a student's paycheck. So there are a lot of jobs on campus and also with off-campus partners at universities where they will say something like work study required to apply for this job or work study preferred. And so there's benefits and there's downsides to work study, but overall it's a benefit. And so if a student is applying for jobs and they were offered work study, they have more job opportunities to apply for than a student that didn't get offered work study. Work study is offered through the FAFSA. So when a student fills out the FAFSA, they are reviewed for work study financial aid eligibility. If you don't get it offered, you can't ask for it. It just means that you weren't eligible to get it. And so with work study, so the student will find a job and they will get their money in the form of a paycheck. It goes directly to them. And if they want, they can make a payment towards what they owe if they owe something, or they can also use the money as they wish. There's nobody that's monitoring how they use the funds. And also, if a student gets offered work study, it doesn't mean that they have to use it. They can choose to take up that opportunity or not. So nothing bad will happen if you get offered work study, but then you decide to either not get a job or get a job like at a restaurant or something. And then I had mentioned the employer benefits. So if you don't know what your employer may or may not offer, it would be good to just ask and see if there's any opportunity there where they might cover like book expenses. I know that some employers sometimes have scholarships, so it's worth asking. There's a question. Yes.
Hi, Jessica, it's Teresa again. On the work study, is that something, and I'm sorry if you covered this, is that something that everyone is eligible for? Do you seek it as a student, or how can you remind me how that works?
Yeah, so a student is reviewed for work study eligibility by filling out the FAFSA. So that's all that needs to be done. The same thing for the North Star Promise program, just kind of taking a few steps back. And so there are income restrictions. And so I don't have a part in determining what that is, but I know if I look at certain things on a student's account, I can see why they were or they weren't offered work study. So there is that income restriction. So there is a question on the FAFSA. I don't know the exact wording, but I think it does say something to the effect of, would you like to be offered work study financial aid? And so a student would check the appropriate box.
Thank you.
Okay. We'll move on. So now we'll talk about the next bucket of financial aid, which is the type of financial aid that you have to pay back. There are different kinds of loans. So when a student fills out the FAFSA, they will get offered either an unsubsidized loan, a subsidized loan, or both. The amount that you get depends on how many credits you're coming in. So typically first year students, they come in with like no more than like 29 credits in general. So there are exceptions. And so the amount that a first year student would get offered in either subsidized and or unsubsidized loan funds would be 5,500. And then when you get to be a second year student, third, fourth, the amount that you get offered goes up. And so just by filling out the FAFSA, you get offered those loans, which is the nice part about these loans. No one's looking at a student's or parent's credit score or anything. There is a loan called the Parent Plus loan. So this loan is a loan that a parent takes out in their name. Some universities have nursing loans or institutional loans. So we have one here. We call it the University Trust Fund loan. There's also a loan called the Minnesota Self Loan. So it's a loan that's managed through the Minnesota Office of Higher Education. And then there are private loans. So we have a tool that we share with students. And then each financial aid office can share out resources for loans, but also private loans. Just a few tips and helpful guidance on loans. It's good to know if the loan that you're taking out will accrue interest when a student is enrolled in school, or if the interest will apply later on. And so with the subsidized loan, if a student takes this out, the interest won't accrue when they are in school. the interest only accrues 6 months after they're done all of their schooling. So that includes grad school, professional school, medical school. And then you have the unsubsidized loan. These do accrue interest when the student is in school. And so typically private loans do too. Sometimes some of the loans offered through a university. It's good to understand the terms and conditions of a loan and knowing what the interest rate is, how much you're taking out. And so while if a student takes out a loan, they don't have to pay it back when they are in school, but they're more than welcome to if they're able to, if it's not going to be a burden. There is something called prepayment, and so it's a strategy for making payments towards interest that accrues. There are some students that say, well, I am working, I do have some money. I want to make a payment or make payments towards my loan. And so I advise them to first make a payment towards the interest at least if they're able to. And so there's a few strategies there. And so meeting with the financial aid office, we can go over some of those strategies. Also, another thing, I think I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm going to go to the next slide, is not over borrowing. So that's why it's good to understand the costs. It's good to understand what financial aid you're getting so that you're not under borrowing or over borrowing. And then you can always meet with the financial aid office and get a better picture on what would be the appropriate amount to take out. I always tell students, if you need to take out a loan, just do one application. And so you do want to look at also the spring semester. And so in general, financial aid, whatever you get, it normally splits in half. So it's half for the fall semester, half for the spring semester. So this is everything, scholarships, grants, loans. And so unless a scholarship donor says like this is only for fall, that's the way that financial aid will split. This QR code will lead you to an Excel sheet that we use with UMR students. And so we use it to determine what that leftover amount will be. And so, and how that will be paid, if it will be paid with out-of-pocket money, if it will be paid with loan money, a mix of both. And so we do share this with students. They're able to use it as they wish. And they just plug in the numbers and all the math is done for you. If you have a question about, well, how much would be an appropriate amount to take out in loans during your undergraduate time at least. So there is a guideline. So think about the first job that you could get after you graduate. Let's suppose that the salary for that would be $60,000 a year. So then for your loans that you take out, it should be no more than that $60,000 a year. Okay. All right. Having the finances discussion. It's good for parents, for families and students to sit down and talk about who is paying for what. Is a student on their own, and are they going to have to fully fund their education with loans? Do they know if there is like a 529 college plan? Do parents have savings that they've set aside for certain costs? What happens with unexpected costs? Let's suppose that a student's laptop breaks down. What does the student do to get the money to pay for a new laptop, which they'll probably need to do their coursework and do their homework? So having that conversation now versus when you are in the thick of things in college and something comes up, I think is good to have it sooner rather than later. Okay. I'll pause here. Let's see. Oh, there is a question. So the cost of attendance, is it the same for international students? The cost of attendance for international students can be a little bit higher because of some costs. And so at UMR, it is the health insurance. And so we require that all students have health insurance. And so with international students, they're going to have this fee of $17.95 per semester. And another student that might have insurance through the state of Minnesota, they wouldn't have to pay this fee. So that's one way that's higher. UMR is unique in that we just have one tuition type. So in-state students and out-of-state and international students, they all pay the same price for tuition. But that might not be the case at other colleges. But for ours, international students would be paying the same price as a Minnesota State resident. And then there are scholarships. So we do have a variety of scholarships. So at the time that you apply, you're considered for some. We do have a special event where students have to meet certain criteria to be invited to that scholarship ceremony. And then all students are considered for certain scholarships. And so when you apply, wherever you plan to apply, it's always good to find out what those different scholarship opportunities are. Okay, I hope, Sandy, I answered your question there in the chat. Other questions before I move on? Okay. Now this part of the presentation is about the FAFSA. So just a quick note for international students. So international students aren't eligible to fill out the FAFSA form, which is the free application for federal student aid. Just in general, they have more limited options. They do have an opportunity to get institutional scholarships, so scholarships from wherever you may decide to go to. Some private loans, although oftentimes private loans for international students, they require a cosigner. I do know that international students can apply for the Minnesota Self-Loan, but for that one, you do need a cosigner. And so there is a form, it's called the CSS profile. There's another one called the SIAFA. UMR doesn't use this, but it would be good to know if institutions, wherever you apply, if they take these kinds of forms. So I've mentioned the FAFSA, so here it is, free application for federal student aid. So this is a form that students fill out to see if they would be eligible for state and for federal financial aid. Oftentimes universities do like it that students do this because that will help to determine some scholarship opportunities that might help to determine if they're eligible for like university loans. I always tell students, just apply. You are in control of what you decide to accept or not. So just because you fill out the FAFSA and you were offered certain things, it doesn't mean that you're required to, accept the work study and the unsubsidized loan and the subsidized loan. So those things you have control over. So the FAFSA opens up every October, so the 1st of October, and that's because of a law that was passed. And every year, if you do want to be considered for federal and state aid, you would have to fill it out every year. So the first time, it just takes a little bit longer. Now the FAFSA form has improved in that it's much better to go through and answer the questions. And then after that, the second, the third, the fourth time you fill it out, it's just renewing information. And then for applicable students, there is also the Minnesota DREAM Act. And then if you do plan on coming to UMR, our school code is the same as the Twin Cities. So like I said, it's if you plan on wanting to be considered for state and federal aid, make sure you're getting that FAFSA in every year. It's good to fill it out sooner rather than later. And sometimes certain colleges will say, well, they'll state a deadline, and they might say something like, we have a preferred deadline of December 1st to get in your FAFSA. And also by doing so, we'll consider you for scholarship, something like that. So it's just a benefit overall to get it filled out sooner rather than later. There's cases of students that do fill it out later on, and that might be because maybe taxes haven't been filed. There's something that needs to be updated with finances. So there is a term called the contributor, and the contributor is a person that has to also put their financial information, their personal information and their financial information on a student's FAFSA. Just because you are a person who has to have their their finances included, it doesn't mean that you're responsible for funding a student's education. We need the income to work off of so that we can determine financial aid that a student is eligible for. So everybody that fills out a FAFSA needs an FSA ID. And so, oh, I think I'm jumping ahead. If you're asking, well, how do I know if I have to be put on the FAFSA? So the FAFSA will walk you through everything. In general, contributors are parents. If parents are separated and then remarried, then it would be like the parent and then also the spouse of that parent that was put on the FAFSA and a spouse. Those are the common contributors. Uh, just a note about divorced and separated parents. And so if this is your case and you're wondering, well, who do you put on there? So if parents are divorced or separated, the parent that's on the FAFSA is the parent that contributed the most financially over the past 12 months. If it's equal, if both parents who are divorced or separated contributed the same, then you put the parent that has the higher income and assets. If divorced or separated parents remarried, then you also have to put that spouse. And then there was a question that came up recently. It was a family who asked about parents that they never married, but they don't live together. And so in that case, it would be the parent that's contributing the most financially. Okay, let me continue here. So when you fill out the FAFSA, you need to select if you're a dependent student or an independent. And so more often than not, students are dependent students. A student might say, well, I'm not listed on my parents' taxes. I do my taxes on my own. My parents don't help me at all financially. In most cases, students are still dependent students. We still need that parent or that spouse's income here. But there are criteria to be considered an independent student. Some colleges do it differently, but in our case, we follow FAFSA's rules. And so here they are. We do have independent students here, and that's because they're married, because they have a child, because they're caring for somebody, or another common case is because of age. So I had mentioned that you need to first create an FSA ID in order to fill out the FAFSA. And so that would be the first step of the whole FAFSA journey, is making sure that the student and whoever needs to be listed on there. So oftentimes a parent, a spouse, they also need to create an FSA ID. If parents are married and if they're filing jointly, only one parent of that couple needs to get an FSA ID. This is the information that you need to create your FSA ID. So personal information, creating the username and password, entering contact information, the communication preferences, creating the challenge questions, and then the two-step verification. Now the FAFSA has gotten easier in that before you had to wait a few days. You had to get your FSA ID, wait a few days, and then fill out the FAFSA. This year, for the first time, now you're able to do both at the same time. You're able to create your FSA ID, and then you're also able to apply, and you get it done all in one sitting. I tell people, when you create your FSA ID, please put your information somewhere where you will have easy access to it. I had a case of a student and a parent who it took us 1 hour to retrieve their login information. It was just a bit of a mess. Everybody forgot everything. They forgot the email they used. They got all their challenge questions wrong. It was a little stressful. We ended up finding their information, but it took us an hour to complete it. So keep that information safe. This is the information that you'll need when you fill out the FAFSA. So your FSA ID, the username, the password, having your 2024 income information available, bank statements, investment records, records of untaxed income. The FAFSA now has gotten easier over the years in that there is a question where you have to check consent, that you consent that you give permission for the IRS to share information to the Department of Education. So the people who administer the FAFSA. It's just for us to easily get that financial information instead of you manually putting it in. And so if you say no, that you don't consent, that the information is released from the IRS, then the student won't be able to be reviewed for eligibility for state and for federal aid. So if you do want to see what the student could get in financial aid, it is important for everybody, student and anybody that has to fill out the FAFSA, to say, check, I consent that I, give permission for the IRS to share my information on the FAFSA. This is what it looks like when you are first accessing the FAFSA. So you go to studentaid.gov. And then you're going to click on, well, if you're going to start the next academic year, you would be clicking on the 2026-2027 FAFSA. This is what it looks like when you start to fill out the FAFSA. So a student can start it first, or a parent can start it first. And this year they made things a bit easier in that they are recommending, the FAFSA people are recommending that students fill it out first. And then when a student fills it out, at the end, they'll be able to invite their parents. And so before, they would have to put in all of this personal information for a parent. Now, it's just like a little code, and we're avoiding that step of putting in like social security number, date of birth. And so if a student does it first, where they fill out the FAFSA, they start it, and then they get their contributor connected to it, so they send that invite, it's easier. If a parent starts it first, they have to fill out all of the students' personal information, and that has a downside in that there's human error, and so that can just cause delays with processing a FAFSA. So if possible, have the student start it first, and then they'll be able to invite the contributor. So this is what the FAFSA looks like. This is from the student's end, and so they're just going to go through each of the steps. This question I put here because this one can sometimes be incorrectly answered by students. And so the question is, are the students' parents refusing to provide information on the FAFSA form? And so we just find that a lot of students say yes when that's not the case. And I think they just maybe misread the question. And so I put it on here because it's a question that's answered incorrectly a lot of times. But in general, the typical answer is no. In general, students or parents or whoever needs to provide financial information other than the student, the contributors, they're willing to do so. One other note about if this is answered yes, then a student would only be eligible for an unsubsidized loan. They would only be eligible for a loan, and they might be missing out on opportunities like state aid, federal aid, money that doesn't have to be paid back. There is an opportunity to provide information if there's some sort of unusual or special circumstance. And so just making sure you read these questions thoroughly and answering them correctly is good. These are the different types of statuses that you could have. So ideally, you want to see a process status. And so when the student logs into the studentaid.gov site where they can access their FAFSA, where they start to fill out their FAFSA, they'll be able to see, like on their dashboard, on their activity page, the status of their FAFSA. And so if it's anything but the process, then that something's going on, right? Somebody still needs to fill it out. Maybe the application wasn't finished. You can save a FAFSA, so you don't have to do it all in one sitting. If you get tired or if you need something and it's in a different place and you need to come back to it, you can always come back to it. When you are done the FAFSA, a good indication that everything was done successfully is when a student gets an email and it tells them that their FAFSA submission summary is ready to view. So the student will get the email, only the student has access to this document called the FAFSA submission summary. Just like the name entails, it includes information on the answers that were provided, colleges that were listed, any next step items. So if you have access to this document, the FAFSA submission summary, it's a good indication that things were done well. So we'll just go through all of the different sections of the FAFSA submission summary. So the first part will tell you the estimate of your federal aid. And so if you're eligible for the Pell Grant, it will tell you the estimated amount. If you're eligible for federal loans, it will tell you what your estimated amount is. Work study, it will also tell you if you're eligible. Sometimes there is that answer you may be eligible for. Something I couldn't capture on this page is at the bottom, there is a number that's called Student Aid Index, and this is calculated from the income and assets that's put on the FAFSA. This number is important because this is the number that universities use to determine if a student is getting work study, if they're getting Minnesota State grants, things like this. The next part of the FAFSA submission summary is the answers. And so when the student and the contributors fill it out, they're not able to see everybody's section. They're not able, so the student is not able to see their parents' answers and vice versa. But here, you're able to see everybody's answers. And so it's always good to make sure that everything was filled out correctly. There is an opportunity to make corrections. And so if you see that something's incorrect, nothing bad will happen if you make a correction. If you can sit down and review your answers. The next section is the schools that were listed on there. And so you've got different categories that you can view to compare schools. And then the last part is next steps. So if you forgot to do something, if you need to submit an additional document, this next steps tab would tell you what you need to do. This is a tool called the Federal Estimator Tool, and it can help you find out how much federal aid you could get. It's an estimate, so keep that in mind, but this would help you know what you're getting rather than you waiting to know what you're getting when you're waiting for that estimated financial aid offer. Okay, we're nearing the end. There are some questions which I might get answered by this last slide here. So there's just a few slides left, and then I'll take a look at the questions. So just some, if you didn't take in anything I just said, this slide I think is very useful. So take action now. Again, I said it's beneficial to do the FAFSA sooner rather than later. Get that FSA ID created and fill it out. Filling out the FAFSA is just one piece of getting the funds to cover college costs. So what I have found in the past is that sometimes students think, oh, I filled out the FAFSA and I'm done. The FAFSA will give me all of the money that I need to cover my college education, and that's not the case. It might be the case for some students, but not for a majority. And so you might have to look at loans, or you might have to talk to family and seeing who might be able to help. Find out what the cost is to attend wherever you're interested in going. This is a scholarship resources page. So it's a document, and I've listed different outside scholarships that you can apply for. But it's also worthwhile to look into what university scholarships might be available to you. What do you need to do? Is there a deadline? There is a frequently asked questions document that might be useful and answer questions you may have. I say apply to institutional scholarships sooner rather than later. So applying for scholarships, this is always a good strategy. Get in touch with the financial aid office over email, phone, setting up a one-on-one appointment. And then Sometimes finances they change. They change because maybe somebody passed away, maybe people separated, got divorced, maybe somebody's work hours were reduced, and so um, different schools have different ways of managing this. But if you have a special circumstances situation, so something in like somebody lost their job, somebody's retiring, and it's happening now, this could affect your financial aid. And so one common special circumstances case is a parent who was working in tax year 2024, which is the income information that you have to put on the FAFSA for the 2026, 2027. Sometimes income was higher then, but current income is lower because somebody lost a job. That's a common example that we have. And so in that case, there's a form you have to fill out, there's documents you need to submit, and the financial aid office would use current finances to determine your financial aid package. Um, all right. And then a note about students who might be eligible for military benefits. And so our campus, we don't have our own University Veteran Services Office, but we do have students work with the main University of Minnesota Twin Cities campus. We also have a contact called Mark Larson, and so he works for the Minnesota Department of Veterans Affairs, and you can get in touch with him. I like Mark because I think that he makes things easy to understand. And he tells you, well, this is what you're going to expect to do. This is what you could expect in aid. And just know that students who do have military benefits that they can access, it takes time. It takes time to process documents. It takes time for you to get your money. But just know that you can reach out to Mark. And then reach out to your university's Veteran Services Office. And then this is the last slide. So this is the contact information for One Stop. So if you think of a question later on, feel free to send us an email. This QR code will lead you to these slides. And so a lot of these slides do have some sort of web page that will give you additional information. All right, so I will stop here. Let me look at the chat. There is a question about how much. So I don't have an exact answer for this question about scholarships. It can range for each student, and there isn't like, oh, you're an international student, and I know that you will get $10,000. I'm not sure. And so at the time that you apply, you will get information, but you probably will only find out when you get your estimated financial aid offer. That's when you'll find out what university scholarships you applied for. And then when you apply, you will get information on what scholarship opportunities might be available. Oh yeah, so sorry, Lindsay, you did answer that. Thank you. And then, oh, if a parent retires, would that go under special circumstances? Yes. If a parent retires this year, yes, you would qualify to fill out this special circumstances form. Teresa, you have a question.
And so when you said on the financial aid statement, will it say what scholarships you're awarded or eligible for? And then you have to take another step to apply for those scholarships.
Yeah, so different institutions have different ways of doing it. I know that UMR students, there is like a scholarship for a certain GPA. And so if you come in with a certain GPA, you're automatically offered one type of scholarship. We have a scholarship day. And so that is invite only. And so that is administered through the admissions office. So in our case, on our estimated financial aid offer, if there's a UMR scholarship, that's because the student will get that. Scholarships that might not be listed are more often outside scholarships. And so there's like local organizations that will award scholarships to students, but oftentimes they don't know who the recipients are until like August or September. And so scholarships, they can always be added at any point. But I would say that you're probably going to know sooner rather than later what university scholarship a student's eligible for. The outside scholarships, they can vary a little bit. I hope I
Thank you.
answered your question.
You did. Thank you very
Yeah.
much.
I can just also provide a brief overview about our scholarship process regarding the admissions process for UMR. As a student applies to UMR, you're automatically going to be considered, if admitted, for one of our academic achievement scholarships. And so this is the kind of first criteria based on a student's unweighted cumulative GPA. At the point of admission, we're awarding potentially a $1,000, $2,000, or $3,000 renewable scholarship. And this can be re-awarded each year a student is within the health sciences program up to the full 4 years. So if a student has an unweighted GPA at the point of admission to UMR of a 3.8 or higher, that's going to be an automatic $12,000 scholarship that's essentially dispersed across those 4 years. Then after a student is admitted, they also have the opportunity to complete the UMR scholarship application. This is separate from the FAFSA, so this is for students to be considered for additional support through the institution, anything from an increase in the academic achievement scholarship, some individual donors who have funds set up through the university, housing grants, so scholarships that can specifically help cover the costs of living on campus. And the priority deadline for that is typically after the new year, especially for our students that are applying in the fall. We are going to start releasing those decisions usually mid-January, around that time that those estimated packages are starting to come out. And then we also have, as Jessica mentioned, a scholarship interview process. So there are several larger scholarships that we award to each incoming first year class. This includes 2 chancellor scholarships, which is a full ride for all 4 years, 5 faculty scholarships, which covers tuition, and then a variety of benefactors and donors who have private scholarships set up through us. And we interview students for those opportunities. Students would need to apply for admission by December 1st. Then we're looking at a variety of criteria and selecting certain students to be invited to interview. And those invitations come out in mid-December. And again, these are for students who would start during the fall of their first year of college with us after graduating high school. So I hope that helps a little bit. Teresa, I see you have your hand up again.
Yeah, so are those typically the criteria based on income and GPA? Or is it broader than that?
Did you say based on income?
Yeah, is it income and GPA focused on the invitation to interview?
Yeah, we do not consider a student's financial background for this scholarship interview process. We're looking at a student's GPA. We're also looking at meeting the application deadline of December 1st. And then within the application, there is a supplemental essay called the passion statement. And we're also reviewing that for criteria for interviews as well. Just kind of several factors. Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Other questions for Lindsay, for myself? Okay, like I said, if you think of something later on, you have the one-stop contact information. Take a note of the slides, the QR code there.
That you are on a website, not on a QR code.
Oh, sorry. Uh-oh. I was trying to find the I forgot I was sharing my screen.
That's okay.
Thank you, Lindsay.
Yes.
Thank you. I wanted to see if we had access to show an example of the special circumstances appeal form, but we did away with the PDF. Now it's online, so I wanted to show the person that asked. Okay. But yes, like I said, if you think of a question later on, please you can send an email and we'll get to your question.
Perfect. I will stop recording. Jessica and I can stay on for a couple minutes if anyone has any questions, but otherwise we'll send a follow-up email tomorrow with the recording, and of course reach out. Thank you all. Have a great rest of your evening.